thinking of time as something that maybe intuitively entails a kind of proportion that we would relate to the viewing experience or to the human scale, the scale of a lifetime, the height of a human, all of these kind of intuitive notions of what proper or normal scale is seem out the window the moment you think about the possibilities introduced by digital media.
Hi, my name is Jan Tumlir, and I'm here at the MoCA Geffen with Paul Pfeiffer, whose exhibition, Prologue to the Story of the Birth of Freedom, is currently up at this institution. In addition, the work Vitruvian Man featured in this exhibition is also on the March cover of Artforum. So first of all, Paul, thanks for joining us here.
Thank you.
When I see that image on the cover of Artforum, it's all the more eye-like because it's further reduced in scale. Now again, it's undergone another shift in scale, and it sort of stares out of the front of the magazine like an eye, and it made me think of the oculus in an ancient domed cathedral, let's say, but in an inverted form, in a sense, right? Because in that architectural structure of the dome, the oculus sort of channels the eye of God down onto the congregation, let's say. And here it's more like the congregation is sort of placed in these descending circles around a spectacle in which we observe godlike figures compete in a ball game.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I think a stadium is a broadcast studio, especially an Olympic stadium. And it's also something that is like a visual representation of a kind of society of nations, or of the nation itself. And yet it's experienced intuitively as a spectacle in which the focus is on some action that's happening on the field. But in fact, so much of the action is a part of the architecture itself and the kind of like unspoken agreement to take one's seat within this arrangement.
So you have this, in a sense, generic mass media content that you deal with, but occasionally that's transposed into, let's say, the Philippines, where you spent a good part of your childhood. So I wonder, how does the Philippines play into your work generally?
The Philippines has been important. I think of Manila and other cities in the Philippines as almost like an extension of my studio. I think of it as like a site of production. Vitruvian Figure was, in fact, a production that, to me, was really only possible through an engagement with like a particular scenario of fabrication in Manila, which is where it was made. The design for the stadium was a collaboration with the architects in Sydney who built the Sydney Olympic Stadium, 100,000 seat stadium. The idea was just to expand it to fit 1 million viewers.
Religious themes abound in this work, and that's also something that we could maybe relate to your background. If I'm correct, your parents were ethnomusicologists. They operated within this educational context, but they also worked for the Methodist Church, is that right?
So the American University is a Protestant university. They were both trained as church musicians. So yeah, I feel like I grew up in an environment that had to do with the like production of the musical culture in the church.
The kind of asynchronic aspect of the material featured on TikTok or YouTube clips, oftentimes made to loop and hence sort of pull the content out of the normal flow of time and create this loop in a sense. That's also one of your basic formal structures, the loop. And you have related it to a kind of religious practice, to meditation, to prayer, to repetition,
Right.
As it's involved in that context.
The sheer possibility of creating a digital loop just introduces an idea of time that immediately suggests infinity, both like a microscopic kind of, 5 frames repeating over and over again, a kind of miniature piece of time, but by virtue of its endlessness via a loop speaks to infinity.
Somehow these media are perhaps reordering our relationship to time, not necessarily driving it forward, right, but possibly regressing it to older experiences of time outside of duration. Again, this kind of idea of the time of the miracle is something that can happen again and again, that throws the chronology of everything off, right?
I mean, in some ways for me, the jump to biblical titles comes from an intuition about the implications of what the digital does to a kind of common sense, inherited notion of time and space, which does seem apocalyptic to me. And so almost like a medieval sense of wonder around the world, and a kind of miraculousness of being immersed in it, to me returns at the beginning of the 21st century with digital media. We don't know it, what it is. It's hard to wrap our brains around it, but the implications have something to do with the scale relationship of infinity, kind of an impossible scale.
Yeah, I mean, that brings me to the consideration of scale in your work and in the show in particular, because seeing all your work together, one becomes aware that really scale is one of the things that you're actually playing with perhaps the most. It indicates to me that there's a sculptural side to your practice, even in the production of images, that you're perhaps dealing with them sculpturally because the question of scale is always central.
Yeah. Well, definitely the idea of, from the start, of placing a video image, which itself is an image of a spectacle, say like a basketball player on a court with flashing cameras all around them, of miniaturizing it and putting it on a device meant for portability, so it almost appears like whatever it is, this thing is the tip of the iceberg, the majority of which is behind the wall. So the wall, to me, it accentuates the wall as a kind of facade and indicates a kind of the possibility of a massive infrastructure that's invisible. But in doing that, it appears as a sculpture in the sense of like a physical object in the room, and one that you like consciously or intuitively negotiate the room to figure out what it is. And only after you kind of come up to it and get to an intimate distance do you then see lute scene playing.
I was going to say that there's almost a kind of a Jonathan Swift Gulliver's Travels aspect to the show. Certain objects are compressed into these minuscule monitors. Other objects are presented life-size, and then certain objects are scaled up.
I mean, it has to do with positive and negative space in a way. The positive space being the object and the negative space being the room itself. And although we focus on the object, what's really at play is equally the negative space. So I guess in some ways, Vitruvian Figure is another version of that. The idea of making a monumental miniature that's actually, only a half step away from the actual monumental forms of architecture that we're playing with these days, made possible by digital tools.
Right.
It kind of throws the built environment and just our capacity to imagine time or the navigation of space completely out of human scale.
Thanks so much, Paul, for this opportunity to talk at greater length about some of these works of yours.
Thank you.